the first thing we need to do is change ourselves. And the easiest way to do this is no longer use that label of a superhero or whatever you call yourself that you think is heroic. Change yourself to a super visionary. Give yourself a title of someone that is moving or creating a movement. I am trying to impact a community in a certain way, and I want to surround myself by others that are served by experiencing this with me.
That was Mike Michalowicz, and this is episode number 175 of the Chopped Podcast. Hey there, I'm Marley of the blog Namely Marley. I'm your host, and this is the Chopped Podcast. You know, this is the podcast designed for people just like you, bloggers who love food. Thanks so much for joining me today. And I just want to say a quick thank you to everyone who's been reaching out to me via direct message and email and just letting me know how much you're loving this podcast. I have to tell you, it really means so much to hear from you. I'm so glad to know that this podcast has been helpful to so many people, some of whom have transformed their blog from hobby to highly successful businesses. I may be the person behind the mic, but you're the rock star in my book, and I'm so glad that you're here with me today. On to today's topic. Today I'm talking with Mike Michalowicz. I first learned about Mike in a private Facebook group for food bloggers. They were raving about his book called Profits First. And with my background in business, I was really intrigued to learn more about this book, and especially as it applies to entrepreneurs. And so I invited him on the show to talk about it. Before I go on any further, I want to add, this is an adult conversation and there is some adult language in today's episode. So just be forewarned. So I found this conversation with Mike so inspiring, and I think you will too, because Mike is addressing a lot of the issues we face as food bloggers, we're influencers, we're also entrepreneurs. So I call it the quote, do it all syndrome. I don't know. Do you have this? You know when you have it because you feel like you have to do it all. Mike calls it superhero syndrome. You'll love his description of that and the ways he likes to get around it. It's really a clever approach. The thing is, it can keep your business stuck and leave you feeling so stressed out. You're not even enjoying your work anymore. I mean, at that point, in my theory, we might as well just go get the stressful corporate job that we all ran away from, or maybe it was teaching, or maybe it was some other job that you were in that you left because you wanted to follow your dream. And the next thing you know, you find yourself just exasperated with every little last thing you've got to get done and feeling like, you're the only one that can do it right. Trust me, we've all been there before. It's part of the journey. How can we move from this stressed and overworked, have to do it all syndrome to inspired and visionary and feeling passionate about what we're doing? Basically, that's the point of today's discussion. I love this quote from Mike. We're not in life to support business. We're in business to support life. Wow. Isn't that amazing? That's just like a game changer. It's one of those statements you have to kind of think about it slowly and take it in. It really makes a big difference. Mike and I spent some time talking about teams and whether you have a team or not. In fact, you may be a solopreneur. Either way, there are ways to take what this discussion is about and apply it to yourself, even in a singular form. So for example, I like to think of myself as multidimensional. So I can easily break myself into at least 3 different modes. I have the CEO mode, I have my manager mode, and I have my assistant mode. And I can easily find myself in assistant mode too much. Why? I think it's because I love being in this situation where I get things done. I love being in that, get her done, checking off boxes. I have my spreadsheets, you all know that. And I'm just like, I'm working towards that number because I love to create these spreadsheets that automatically calculate what % done I am. And so I can kind of easily get into this game of where I'll just keep doing more and more and more to try to get that number higher and higher. So that's kind of an area where that can be a problem because I could spend so much time in assistant mode because it feels good. Getting those tasks done feel good, but it doesn't actually move the needle towards my vision because I've not spent any time in that CEO visionary mode where I'm, looking at the big picture and trying to figure out the directions that I'm going and where I want to, interact with my audience and things like that. And then I also have the manager mode that, takes the vision from the manager and decides what tasks actually need to be done to fit the vision. So, that's another example where you could easily find yourself so busy in things, but are they the right things? So I think it's really important to spend some time in each of those three modes. So like, that's just what I'm trying to say. Even if you hear Mike today talking about a team, you can actually look at yourself as a team as well. And then the goal would be to work towards a day where you can hire a virtual assistant or, other people that are part of, your actual team. I actually think it's important to be working towards that. For me personally, I love working collaboratively, and I love being able to hire people that, have expertise in certain areas that can really help move the needle, and I don't have to have that expertise in that area. Does that make sense? So Mike is talking a lot about delegation today and a lot about how to inspire your team. We talk about a lot of other things too, so I don't want you to think it's only about that, but I just want you to know, I think it's nice to have that vision for yourself that maybe someday you're going to be having this team, and to know how you want that team to operate is so important. And in fact, I really want to encourage you to think about that team model even more. And next week, I am going to be having a discussion with a food blogger who has just really taken leaps and bounds on that whole team model related to food blogging in particular. And I'm so excited about that episode, and I can't wait to share it with you. So be sure to tune in next week as well. So today we can kind of talk about the theory and the process and the ways that you can make your team work. And then next week, you're going to hear somebody actually talk about how they've used the team model as a food blogger. But for now, let's get straight to it. Here's today's featured discussion with Mike Michalowicz. Hey everyone, I'm happy to have Mike Michalowicz. He's of the site by the same name, and he's also the author of multiple books, including Profit First and his latest book, Clockwork, Design Your Business to Run Itself. Hey Mike, welcome to the Chop Podcast.
It's a pleasure to be here, Marley. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, I'm really looking forward to our discussion. First of all, I come from a business background, and I'm just so intrigued by how business and entrepreneurship overlap. And so I'm really looking forward to talking with you about all that.
Oh yeah, I suspect we'll have some fun.
Yeah, I think so too. I like having fun, so that'll work. So I noticed that, you've, in your bio, you mentioned that you've found and sold $2 million or multi-million-dollar companies, and you've created yet another multi-million-dollar company. You've got all these accolades related to small business and, entrepreneurship. I was just curious if you could tell us a little bit about what, before that, what kind of caused you to do all this? Why did you start your own business?
Yeah, and if I may, I'll share what happened in between too, because I think the real juice is there. Because what you shared is the CV or the resume of the entrepreneur, and to be totally frank, you shared like the bullet points that fills out maybe half of a piece of paper. But for me to have a robust CV, I had to add proficient at Word, speaks English, that's it. Those are the highlights. I started my first business, which was in computer technology, because I couldn't get a job. So I got a basic job when I returned out of college, but not in the profession I wanted to be in, not even close. And one night, with being a little bit imbibed, a friend of mine challenged me to start my own business. And I'm not saying liquid courage is the way to start a business, but for me it worked.
Yeah.
And I'm happy I did, because I bet you if I didn't have that night, I wouldn't have started the entrepreneurial path and not be here. So I did that and started my own business. It was very fear driven. That's the reality, I think, of a lot of entrepreneurship is pure panic, a need to make money, constant stress. But I'm also grateful for that, at least in the beginning stages, because that got me up at 5 a.m. and working till 5 the next morning. It brought a manic but relentless source of energy. And over time, fear is not a good way to sustain, but it gets you moving in the beginning. Ultimately, that turned to confidence as I started getting traction. And I sold that business. I never really made money running it. It was constant hand to mouth, but made my money selling it. My second business was in computer crime investigation, made money selling it. Fortune 500 actually acquired that company and became entrenched in this belief that profitability, our success, is after extraordinary effort, not during. And that became my downfall. I started another business as an angel investor, one that's conveniently off of my CV, because that was a disaster. I started 10 companies, all of them collapsed. It eradicated all of the money I had accumulated. So I was on the verge of bankruptcy, but lost my house over it, lost my possessions, grateful, humbled that I did not lose my family over it. And I went through a period of depression
I bet.
because I
Yeah.
did not understand what really made a successful entrepreneur. I was packed with arrogance and ignorance during those first businesses and
That's a
third.
bad combination.
Oh, deadly, right?
Yeah.
Right. It's a
Yeah.
deadly combination. And it forced me to restart my life. And I decided to become an author, uh, mostly to fix my own wrongs. Like every book I've written, I'm exploring something I didn't and still perhaps don't understand, with this realization that I don't really understand entrepreneurship. I know a little piece of it, but it's a little piece. There's so much to explore. And I've devoted my life now to seeking out the answers that solve my challenges, and serve others in that process.
So it's interesting that you kind of put the puzzle pieces together by writing about it.
So you know what's funny? So when I went through depression, now I had what's called functional depression. It's the highest level of depression where you can still function,
Yeah.
but you remove yourself from any social scene. There's a constant cloud over me, negativity, and for me, it manifested also in drinking. Like I am not a drinker. I mean, I'll throw back a glass of red wine on the weekend or
Sure.
something, but I'm not. I just don't feel compelled to drink much, except for this phase of my life. I use it as medication,
Mm.
and I'm so grateful. I was in a group with a few other gentlemen, and a group that had confidence enough in each other to share our raw, true stories. And I told these guys that I don't know how much longer I can go this way, and I don't know what to do. And one of the guys said, "You need to start journaling," which, by the way, is the guy's word for start a diary. And and I thought it was absurd. And he said, "Well, here's what you do: every thought that comes to mind, write it down." Um, and I mean, I said, "What do you mean? Like, do I write down like good positive thoughts?" He goes, "No, no, no. Whatever you feel, you need to let it out. Anger,
Yeah.
hatred. Like I had hatred toward my definition of God. I had anger and resentment toward myself. Um, I had all this steam building up in me. So I started to start a journal, and that became the turning point for me. And it wasn't like I started writing and the next day I'm like, oh, I feel so good. I would write and let out all this anger and frustration and sadness out. And what would happen was just for a minute, sometimes two or three, I get clarity. Like I just feel this relief. And during those 1, 2, or maybe 3 minutes, I could at least focus forward for a few seconds. And slowly the anxiety and anger would build up again. And I'd write again. And over time, sometimes it was giving me a day or two of clarity. And that started me moving forward, getting traction. I wasn't spinning my wheels anymore, loathing myself or my situation. I now, in spits and spurts, would get a little traction forward, and things started to improve and get better. And that became the relief mechanism. I barely journal nowadays. I don't feel I need the outlet, but I have it readily available. The moment I start to feel this despair or disappointment or anything that I just want to release, I now got my handy dandy diary.
I love this so much because I have said many times on this show, and I don't think I'm brilliant for coming up with it. I think I might have heard it somewhere else, and I'm just repeating it. But entrepreneurship is the modern day journey of self discovery. So
Yeah, I'm
you
into
know,
that.
I think what you're saying is that as you were doing all this, it just brought up all these fears, all the I think the thing we could do is like do the traditional route of having the job, that everybody's like, oh wow, you work, in Kansas City, Hallmark's really big. So if you were
Mhm.
walking around saying you worked at Hallmark, everybody would be like, wow, that's really
Yeah,
cool.
right.
And so that feels really good and it makes us feel like we have our position in the world. But when you take on this something that's all, different from that, it is, I don't know, it can brings up all those feelings of insecurity. It's very
Yes.
scary.
And I would even say entrepreneurship amplifies things
Yes.
because so my life's purpose is to eradicate entrepreneurial poverty. For me, that was the big finding. And this term entrepreneurial poverty is something I created or invented to describe a unique phenomenon that happens to us as entrepreneurs. And here's what it is. The day you start your business, your friends or acquaintances who've never been a business owner or understand what it takes have a misperception. The day I started my business, my friends are like, "Oh my gosh, you're a millionaire now," and all you do is sit on the beach all the time drinking Mai Tais. And the reality is, the day I started my business, panic ensued. I was making no money. I didn't make any money for eons. It felt like I was constantly stressed, and I worked harder than I ever had worked in my life. So this disconnect of the perceived experience of the entrepreneur. And the reality is that gap I call entrepreneurial poverty.
Mm.
The saddest part, though, is many of us entrepreneurs feel compelled to carry on the mythology, to pound our chest. I mean, you can't go
Yeah.
to a client of yours for the first time and say, you know what, my life is miserable. I'm barely surviving. I need your business desperately. No, you have to say, I'm accomplished. I'm a very successful blogger. I do wonderful things. So we actually have to carry on this perception of what the world sees in us, yet there's this gap. My life's work is to close that gap, to make the perceived reality the actual reality. And I think the result is when you have a flow of money that's predictable, when you have the freedom and time to do what you want when you want, that it brings about this confidence. It allows us to no longer be in survival mode. It allows us to be in contribution mode where we can serve our family, our friends, our community, our world. And that's the gap I'm trying to resolve.
Yeah, I like that. It kind of reminds me of a quote by Seth Godin. He's the marketing guy, right?
Yeah, oh yeah, he's
Yeah,
a
yeah.
phenomenal author.
His point is that you can spend all your time and effort, and but if you're not making money, you're not being successful at it. It's pretty darn miserable. You might as well just go out and get a full-time job. Go do that then.
It's
But
martyrdom, it's
yeah,
martyrdom. And what that is,
yes,
we sacrifice ourselves and then think that's what we have to be. I'm actually just recently, at least in my head, have been raging against the concept of a not-for-profit, because a not-for-profit already negates the necessity of sustainability. It's all talking about contribution. And I believe in contribution, but I believe we can't be effective in contributing until we care for ourselves. So
mm,
I think not-for-profits must be profitable to be
yeah,
sustainable, and then their excess they can give and change the world. And I believe, sadly, most for-profits act like the not-for-profit. We're all about serving clients, growing, contribution, and we compromise the business or compromise ourselves. I can't tell you how many entrepreneurs go years without paying themselves, actually resent the business they've started,
mm.
and therefore they're compromising the entire vision they had in the first place.
So do you see kind of a mindset issue then with entrepreneurs? In other words, maybe you go into it because you have a passion for some particular topic, but you don't have the business experience maybe you've got this mindset that tells you, you don't deserve to make this kind of money. Do you see those kind of issues?
Oh yeah, I see those roadblocks all the time. I think we're fraught with ego. Sometimes the pounding the chest ego, where we want to compare ourselves to other entrepreneurs. Oh, you have a $200,000 business. I got to make mine 300,000. It's this competitive nature.
Yes.
But then there's also the constant undermining, the self negative talk to ourselves. We can't do this. We're not the experts.
Who do you
We
think you
suck.
are? Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and that constant drone, that constant voice saying we suck, we actually start to believe it. What I found is the first thing I needed to do was stop the comparison. There will always be someone ahead of me. There will always be someone behind me. And what I did was I changed the vernacular. I used to say I look up to someone, like I really look up to them, which in by default, by definition, by saying I look up to someone, I am saying that I look down upon myself. They
Yes.
are in a superior position.
Yes.
Conversely, sadly, at times I've pitied others. I look down at them, which is just as negative. It means I
Mm.
am seeing myself as a superior, and I am grateful I'm not them. It's an avoidance mechanism. What I found is I never use those terms look up, look down anymore. I say I look over. I look over to people. Because what I realize is we're all in the same life's circle. We're just in different experiential moments. Some people have what we define as success because they have money or fame or comfort, but that doesn't necessarily mean success. That just means they're going through that experience. Other people's
Right.
have lack, and that doesn't mean negativity. It just means they're seeing the valley and the peaks in front of them. So I like to say I look over to others, and I ask when I speak to others, never look down. Please don't look down upon me, and please don't look up to me. Look over to me too. And then we see that we're all on the same circular path, and we have something to learn and gain from each other.
You know what I love about this is because I play tennis. I'm just like the average recreational tennis player, but I play competitive, and I'm always
Nice.
looking for ways to correlate what I'm learning on the tennis courts to blogging because I just feel like it's just powerful stuff. And so I've spent a lot of time worrying about what other people are thinking about me as they're watching me. Like, maybe you're playing a match against this individual, but other people are standing by and they're watching. I'm thinking, ooh, do they think I'm very good or they think I'm really bad? And I have just had to learn to I call it my etch a sketch. I'm constantly etch a sketching. Like I'm just like shaking it up and removing all those thoughts from my brain. And I think what I'm hearing you say is that we should be doing that as bloggers as well. Like or entrepreneurs, like we've got to be constantly clearing all that, and getting it out because it doesn't serve us.
Right. It totally doesn't. It doesn't serve us. Um, but it's also human nature. So I
Yes.
think to deny it is also a mistake. I think we have to let thoughts flow through us and not resist. So I'm not like this Hindu
You
or
sound
some
like
kind of
it.
monk
Yeah.
that has that ability, which I believe is extraordinary. But I don't have that ability. I do compare myself to others, and then I simply say, "Hey, I accept that. This is a reflection of who I don't want to be. That's kind of passing through me, but I'll let it pass through me." Then I try to reflect on what is the real way I want to see it. And over time, I've adjusted. I'm far from perfect at execution, but I've definitely improved on it simply because I allow it to happen, but don't allow it to stick.
So we don't let it kind of define us. We just
That's right. Yeah, I'm
note
trying
it.
to redefine my identity, and it just takes time.
Yes, it's a skill. I think that's really important to think about that as a skill to move to work on.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to ask you kind of a core question because I have heard different definitions of the word entrepreneur, and I wonder if you could kind of shed some light on what you think about that, because I've heard some people say, like, if you're just doing contractual work for other people, you're really more like a freelancer. Do you make any kind of distinction about what is an entrepreneur?
Yeah. So an entrepreneur to me is someone who has a vision that is more of a challenges the established norm. So whatever industry you're in, there's an established expectation, and we can replicate what others are doing. I consider that business ownership or a really glorified job because we're not defining a new path. To me, entrepreneurship is someone who challenges the norms, maybe extracts ideas from other industries and brings it to theirs. Um, it's inherent risk taking, which ironically I think is the least risky thing to do. Because when we challenge the norm, we establish new standards. And yes, we're going to falter and slip along the way. But if we stick with establishing new norms, we can redefine industries. And to me, that's glorious success.
Yes, it sounds a little scary is the word that comes to mind, because, I do think, we're food bloggers that mostly listen to this podcast. And so we are busy developing the recipes that other people want to use. So I think
Yeah.
it's easy to kind of like get into that mode of like, I want an exact recipe. But I think what I'm hearing you say is it's really a little bit more about experimenting and bringing new ingredients into
Yeah.
the mix.
I have a saying that better is not better, different is better. And what
Ah,
what different
that's good.
guarantees us is attention. Like it is wired into every human behaviorally that when we see something unexpected or different, we pay attention to it. You know, a horrible example, but you could be staring at a highway, you see all these different cars blowing down the highway, and maybe something will kind of stand out, a pink car or one of those weird cars that changes colors as it moves. But what would really stand out is if a giraffe starts walking down the highway. It'll be on every news channel out
Yeah.
there because it's so unexpected. Conversely, we could be at the zoo staring at the giraffes, and at a certain point, it's like, okay, I've had enough. And then all of a sudden, a car comes careening through the giraffe exhibit. That will get on the front page news. So it's the context of the community. If you're just more of the same, you're blurry. If you really stand out, you'll get attention. Now, attention doesn't guarantee business, but here's I'm brain farting here, but if you're a food blogger, I don't know if one exists, but why not a food blogger that only works with like torches? Like every recipe requires a propane torch of some sort to prepare it. That's crazy. It's
Yes.
odd. It's different. It'll get attention. Now you have to deliver on the goods. I'm not saying like, be a food blogger wearing the Bozo the Clown outfit and go yucca yucca every time someone comes by. You'll get their attention, but you may not get their permanent attention. So we have to do something that's different. Therefore, it stands out, but has to then deliver the value behind it.
So you've got to have the goods. You've got to have the
You got to
quality.
have the goods, but
Yes.
I'll tell you, a lot of people have the goods, but don't stand out, and that's even worse because now they're a missed opportunity, but people will never see you.
Ah, yeah, that's the tricky one. In other words, you've got the quality content, but finding your way of standing, being the giraffe. How do you do that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's exactly it.
Okay, so in your book, Clockwork, you talk about these 4 Ds, and I'm really obsessed with this right now. So I was hoping you could describe that for us.
That's cool. I love it. It's funny. I just had a call today with someone, and we may have discovered a fifth D.
Oh,
But
cool.
yeah, that's the big mystery. That's the big mystery. I won't reveal it yet because I got to work. I got to
It'll be
work
your
a
next
testament.
book.
Yeah, for the next
The
book,
fifth
right?
D.
Yeah, I actually may one day revise it to include this mystery D. It's kind of like Pluto, Planet X.
I
Is it
like.
really there? Is
Is
it
it
not?
really a planet? Yes.
Is it really a planet or is it an ice ball? So that's what this fifth D may be. But here's the 4 Ds. They are the stages of entrepreneurial development and also the stages that every business must be delivering on or experiencing at all times. The entrepreneur wants to scale through these, but the business must be rooted in all four. Now, let me explain what they are because that'll give context to this. The first D that every business must do is called doing. It's the activity of delivering your products or services to your customers. It's the writing of the blogs and so forth. The other elements, though, of doing is anything that supports it. So the marketing, the invoicing, anything that supports the business to be able to deliver to the customer is also doing. The next level up is called deciding. And as an entrepreneur, as you grow your business, you'll move on to the deciding phase. The deciding phase is where we make decisions for the help that we bring on board. So maybe bring on a part-time assistant, virtual help, maybe an employee that's full-time. And what happens is you give them tasks. Let's just say invoicing. This is something I did with someone in-house here. And I gave them a task and said, please do invoicing. A minute later, her name was Jackie. Jackie came back and said, Mike, should we sort by last name or first name? And I had to make a decision. I said, well, we've always done this by last name. Sort our clients by last name. She says, thank you. She leaves. She comes back a minute later, says, should I bill in increments of time or is it a project-based thing? She leaves. She comes back and there's this constant stream of questions. Now, the interesting thing in the beginning, it's actually very flattering. It means she wants to learn. But at a certain point, it becomes ad nauseum. She's asking the same questions repeatedly. I think she's an idiot. And the thing is, she's not. What I'm doing is I'm stuck in the deciding phase. The deciding phase is where you give a task for someone, but the moment an anomaly presents themselves, they come back to you for direction. And many entrepreneurs actually empower that. It satisfies our ego. We know all. Secondly, it's also a protective mechanism for the employee. They won't make a mistake because they're following your direction, so they don't need correction. And if something goes awry, it's not their fault. You're the one who gave them direction. So it's a very protective measurement. So both the employee and the entrepreneur are engaged in keeping this relationship, but it prohibits the growth of an organization. It's basically one brain with lots of arms, and that can't work for a sustained period. In fact, I'd say it's about 96 or 97% of small businesses in the US are under 3 employees because of this exact phenomena. We are making the decisions for everyone, and therefore have no time ourselves to work anymore either. It's just constantly putting out fires and answering questions. So we need to move on to the next D. The next D is called delegation or delegating. Sadly, many entrepreneurs think they're delegating when they're not. They're in fact task rabbiting. I told you that first scenario. We give a task, we make decisions. Delegation is not the assignment of tasks. Delegation is the assignment of outcomes. Instead of saying, do our invoicing, I would say to Jackie, it's important for us to bill timely and accurately. Do you understand that? Yes, that's the outcome. Why is that? Why do you think that's important to our clients? And let her explain it, to own the outcome. Then I say, we have a best practice. We've historically been invoicing a certain way. I'm going to give it to you, but any opportunities you see for improvement, it's your responsibility for tackling that. Anytime you have a question, it's your responsibility to figure it out on your own. So I'm actually pushing the decision-making to her. And yes, because of how we trained our employees and how people behave, she will come to me with a question. I need to, in that point, have the discipline of saying, I'm not going to answer your question. What's your decision? To push the decision back upon them. And I think many people know that, but few execute on it. But there's one more part of delegation that almost no one does, and yet it's the most important thing. And that is approving all of their decision-making. What I mean is, true story, Jackie was taking over invoicing. I signed the outcomes to her. She came back to me and says, hey, we need to improve how we're sorting invoices. I said, that's wonderful. She's like, I want to tell you what I did. I said, okay. She goes, I think sorting by last name or first name was a little bit confusing because we had redundancy. I decided to sort our clients by middle initial. By middle initial. And I'm sitting there going, oh my Lord. And that's where I got to bite my tongue. And I said, Jackie, awesome. Thank you for making a decision that you felt is in the best interest of our company. We're going to play this out. Let's see how it goes and give me feedback. So I supported and approved her decision. Now, no surprise, she came back a few weeks later and said, this is the worst system ever. I said, okay. I said, what do you decide now? And she's like, you know what? We're going to go to a coding system. And she created this coding system, which was superior to anything we had before. And that was the epiphany. By allowing her to make mistakes and supporting her, she became empowered, emboldened to continue to move our organization forward.
Whereas if you would have put the hammer down, right, she would have.
Exactly. And that's what I normally do. It's like, are you an idiot? Yeah. Middle initial? Gosh. And I would revert back to deciding. I would take it over and defeat the progress of the company. The highest level is called designing. That's where entrepreneurs want to move toward. And designing is where we have clarity on the outcome. What do we want this organization to achieve? Then it's aligning all of our team, that could be clients, vendors, employees, virtual help, to make sure that we're choreographed toward achieving that vision. It's the strategic and tactical decisions that we need to make often on a daily basis to make sure we're moving as efficiently toward that vision as possible. That's where the entrepreneur wants to grow. And throughout the rest of the organization, we play out the other D's.
Okay. So you don't want to know reason I love this so much is because a lot of food bloggers, at least I mean the ones that I've interacted with and that I've heard from, fall into the category of solopreneur. And when I first looked at this list, I had this revelation recently where I realized I was spending too much time in what I called assistant mode, which would probably be relevant to your doing mode. I was doing.
Yeah.
And I think the reason I find myself there a lot is because it's very comforting. I can easily do these things. It gives me a
Yes.
sense of accomplishment, but it's
Yep.
work I should be hiring others to do.
No question about it. It's interesting. The more energy consuming work is thought. It is harder to
Yes.
think than do. In
Right.
the book, I outline a challenge. I say you have 10 minutes to solve a Rubik's Cube or 10 minutes to dig a ditch. Most people will revert to actually digging the ditch. Labor intensive, but it's actually easier. Repetitive, obvious task.
Yes.
Very low, brain demand, if you will.
Right.
Some people will do the Rubik's Cube, get so frustrated within a few minutes, they'll run out and do the ditch. What we need to do is truly elevate ourselves. We really need to put ourselves in the capacity of strategic thought. It does require the most amount of energy, and the person best suited to this is the visionary. It's the entrepreneur. I even point out, there's a statue dedicated to the importance of thought. The statue is called the thinker.
Right.
Here's a naked guy with his fist on his
Yes.
chin, just contemplating. There's no statue called the doer. I have yet to hear, where's Michelangelo's The Doer? There is none. And we need to elevate to what is heralded, which is deep strategic thought. If we want to achieve the highest degrees of success, however we define it, it requires extraordinary thought.
Yes, your 4 Ds is relevant on an individual level as well as it is relevant on a team level. That's why I think it's pretty brilliant. It's great.
Yeah, and it's interesting as we elevate ourselves to design, people in your organization, if you're an organization of one, by the way, you can do this. Some people hear this and they go, "It's just me." Well, yeah, it doesn't have to be just you forever. We need to start shifting toward design, and it's not a switch. It's not like tomorrow all I'm going to do is sit around and think.
Yeah.
This is a throttle. You build into it. It's a slow but deliberate process. And to your point, what you'll see is some some internal entrepreneurs, if you will start to elevate themselves. As they see the owner of the business elevating themselves to strategic thought, some people will inherently raise themselves to a capacity of leadership. And it's funny, as I did this for my own organization, one of the benefits of being an author is you're the ultimate guinea pig too. And there's the ultimate accountability. Like if I don't live by clockwork or profit first or any of my books, like people will hang me proverbially by the noose.
Yes.
So I got to live by this stuff. And as I elevated myself, and I'm an author, so I'm a creative too. I also write for a living, the same as everyone listening in. To elevate myself, I had to move to strategic thing. And team members here have elevated. My little organization has grown to 14 people now. And 2 or 3 of those people, Kelsey being one, Ron's another, have elevated themselves into a leadership capacity, availing me to think much more strategically than ever before, to do the true design work, to move our organization forward, and to come up with thoughts that help move entrepreneurs forward.
Well, yeah, and then you've got a team of people who are motivated, along the same line. That I don't know, like you're talking about thinking. I love thinking collaboratively, so having some people that you can work with and collaborate with, I think it makes it even that much more enjoyable.
Oh, it's the best. I'm working on a new book right now, and one of the leaders here of our organization, and well, by the way, we are title free here. There is no president or receptionist or any different title. There's just people. Sometimes to communicate, we have to give a title, and we'll just make one up on the spot.
Yeah.
But we intentionally don't have that because we don't want someone to be in a superior or inferior position. And since we don't have that, one of our leaders here is Paul. And Paul readily calls me out and says, Mike, that idea you have, I call bullshit on it. It's just not working. And I think that empowerment of our colleagues becomes this
Oh, yeah.
collaborative, to your point, this very collaborative intellect, which brings about a far superior result than a myopic, singular, decision maker.
Oh, yeah, I absolutely agree. And I think, honestly, that's probably one of the reasons people hate working at the corporate office more than anything is, all of that, I don't know, the hierarchy and all of that, not being able to say what you think in meetings. I think that, slowly whittles away at the at the morale.
Does. I had one corporate job in my entire life. It's when I sold my second business. It was acquired, like I said, by a Fortune 500. I had a contractual obligation to work there
Oh,
for at least a year. After 3 days, I was proverbially suicidal.
oh,
It was horrible how much and I noticed my colleagues there were required to work within certain lanes that you don't
yes.
come out of, and then the
Oh,
politics,
terrible.
holy cannoli!
Yes.
And I actually got fired from the company that acquired me before I made it even a year. It it was miserable,
Oh,
and I look back on that time, I remember getting fired, walking out, and feeling this sense of relief that I can get back to entrepreneurship, and at the same time, I felt this remorse for people that were stuck there.
yes.
I understand why corporate America operates the way it does. It's an efficiency thing, but it's also a manufacturing environment. We're manufacturing people, and it's to me, there's a repulsion
Yeah, I
there.
mean, look at the rows and rows of cubicles. If that doesn't come across as
Oh,
manufacturing, I don't know what does.
oh gosh, it's
It
hard.
is. Okay, so I want to address that, and you kind of talked a little bit about this in the delegating D, but I find it. Okay. So let me say this: solopreneurs, I think, have a tendency to be a little bit controlling, and I've noticed this definitely in food blogging. There's a tendency towards perfectionism in a way, like we have to have perfection in our content, our posts. We feel like all these decisions really matter. So it
Yeah,
can tend to make us feel a little bit like a control freak. And I'm curious if
yeah.
you've counseled other entrepreneurs on ways to hire other people and let it go and let them make these decisions like you're talking about.
I have, and it starts with letting it go. I call it the superhero
Ah,
syndrome. I was a sufferer for longer than I care to remember, and what the superhero syndrome is this fictitious belief that we need to swoop in and save the day. The analogy would be Superman, or pick your favorite superhero. Lex Luthor attacks the world, and we all sit here begging Superman, please save us.
ah.
But I've concluded that Superman is kind of a dick. Uh, and I'm not, and it's listen, I'm not being sexist here. Wonder Woman's a dick too,
Okay.
and right, like even dickhood around. And the reason I feel this way is because there's this dependency. There's this wake of destruction. I don't know if you've seen any of these movies, Wonder Woman or Superman or Black Panther. Every every battle they have leaves epic damage to the city
Yes.
and area they're in.
Yes.
Hard. They don't have an epilogue to the movie saying, "Oh, now we're going to revisit the city that took 50 years to reconstruct. Thanks, Superman. Appreciate it." Right?
Yeah.
And and the thing is, so there's this wake of destruction, but there's this dependency. And every time Lex Luthor does another attack, we are even more indebted and more hopeful that Superman will please save us one more time. It's actually disabling our army, our force. Well, that's what we're doing as superheroes for our
Ah,
business. If we own this label, we're actually making the people around us more dependent upon us, more waiting for us to swoop in and save that PO'd customer, or to fix that problem that no one else could resolve. So there's a
yes.
greater dependency, and then the business actually weakens. We also leave mass destruction, which we can't see. We're just doing the big battle. We
Right.
don't see all the damage we're leaving behind that someone has to clean up. And inevitably, this destruction stays around for 50 years or more. So I think the first thing we need to do is change ourselves. And the easiest way to do this is no longer use that label of a superhero or whatever you call yourself that you think is heroic. Change yourself to a super visionary. Give yourself a title of someone that is moving or creating a movement. I'm trying to impact a community in a certain way, and I want to surround myself by others that are served by experiencing this with me. I want to make their experience so phenomenal in impacting others that this is a life dream come true for them. That is our job. is to trigger a movement. And a movement doesn't mean you're affecting millions. You're not necessarily the next Gandhi or Mother Teresa, if you desire. That's wonderful. But maybe it's impacting a few people very deeply.
Mm-hmm.
But the only way to do that is by being a supervisionary and being of service not only to our clients, but also to our colleagues who join us in this journey.
Oh,
And then
powerful.
the process of making our employees achieve this vision is what I shared with the moving to from doing to delegation. But there's one more element. And what it is understanding their vision. The grand mistake I made for a decade or more was standing in front of my team and saying, hey guys, wonderful news. We've picked the new number. We're going to achieve $1 million in revenue or $6 million or whatever it was. It was an arbitrary number.
Yes.
And the only person that gave two craps about that was me. Like, oh, because if we achieve $6 million, I can get a new house or, whatever it was. And of course, I didn't include that part. I just picked the number. And everyone would, placate me by applauding and saying, rah, rah, rah. But then they would go back and say, why do I care? I just need a job to do X.
Yes.
I didn't know what the X was. And that's what I endeavor to do now. Every employee, if that's the word you use, or every colleague or every person you work with, everyone has their own vision. Everyone has their own dream. We have to become acutely aware of it. One gal here at the office, her name is Amy. She is extraordinary. Amy was seeking a job where she could live a lifestyle where she could walk to work. It was always been her dream. She has children who are growing up. She's soon going to be an empty nester. And she always wanted the flexibility to be able to be home when they're home. Her husband travels a lot. She wants to be able to, on a dime, when he comes home early, to be there for him. She thought the only way to do that was not to have a job, but she missed working. So once I understood her dream, we created the position with the ultimate flexibility. Show when you can. And we created the work around it. She loves this environment, and we love her because she is amazing at the work she does.
Yeah.
And she's moving us closer to our vision than anyone. Another guy here, his name's Mike, also like me. He wants to run his own business one day. He wants to be an entrepreneur. He started a side hustle the day he came here. We teach him what's like to be entrepreneurial. After we do some big decision making, I'll call Mike in and say, Mike, let me debrief you on what we just did here, because I think this is knowledge you can use in your future business. We're actively supporting it. Mike is extremely loyal and loves the company here. He's moving us forward in magnificent ways because his dream's coming true. That's the element so many of us miss.
Wow. And that just sounds exciting too. So not only are we doing things that help our audience, but if we're hiring people that we're doing things to help them as well. I don't know, it just keeps that going, I guess.
Our goal as entrepreneurs is to make everyone win.
Yeah.
I think it's always been one side. Like let's serve the customer wins, but to the disregard of our own colleagues. It's really this alignment process. Our job is to keep everyone's dreams coming true. It sounds like Disney now, but make everyone's dreams come true, and the business leaps forward.
Mike, can you give an example of, you mentioned like if one goal was, hey, we're going to make $6 million, but you decided to change that because that, not everybody bought into that dream. Can you give an example of a dream or a vision that you would create that your colleagues and other people would buy into?
Yeah. So we still have metrics, and we still say what will serve the company in serving our individual dreams, but we tie it in. So our company will say, listen, if we achieve 500 active members, so one of the companies that I'm a co-owner in, it's a membership-based organization. We have 350 plus members right now. The next level of growth would be 500 members, and that represents a certain amount of income, but it also serves the greater purpose of our organization, which is to eradicate entrepreneurial poverty. That's our goal, and our members are the front line that are actually doing that. So our growth will serve this greater purpose our organization is trying to serve. But then I explain, here's what we're trying to do as an organization. But collectively, we have to see how this fuels Mike's dream of starting a business. We have to see how this fuels Amy's dream of having freedom, how it serves Kelsey and Bonnie and Jackie and Ron and everyone here at the organization and Paul. And what we do is we just individually align it, saying, here's what we're moving toward, but are we in this path, are we fulfilling what you want? And then it becomes very magnetic. I still tell you, I don't think people are like, rah, 5 million or 6 million or 500 members. I don't think they're so jazzed about it, but they are jazzed that it is a stepping stone to their vision.
Right.
So we always go back to their vision.
Yeah, I like that. Okay. Also, in your book, you talk about being very systems focused. And I assume that also helps, if you know exactly what's going on in these, the different processes of running your business, then it helps you, your team members as well.
Yeah. So systems, of course, brings about
Yeah.
consistency, and consistency is necessary for us to serve our customers. I mean, one day you write this phenomenal food blog, and the next day it's an automotive review. People are like,
Yeah.
"What?" Like, we have to stay within our lane, and this plays throughout our organization. So one element that I think is very helpful from the book is most organizations are still stuck with SOPs, that traditional mentality of a standard operating procedure. Here's how we do it. Write it down, draw it out on a piece of paper, give people the booklet and say, follow this recipe or script. Well, as many people listening in may be acutely aware, reader attention is dropping at an exponential rate. So to drop a manual on someone's desk and it goes thunk and expect them to dig into it is ludicrous. The modernized method of SOPs are what I call video captures, or just captures, because it's more than video. You can capture audio and so forth. And what you do is you do a process and you record it. You can use your smartphone to record some activities, or maybe if you're doing it on a computer, you can use screen capture software. Loom is a free, I'm not necessarily an advocate for them beyond the fact that they're free and effective. There's others out there. So we happen to use Loom. And what I do is, as I do an established process, whoever's responsible for it currently does it again. As they do it, though, this time they record it and they voice over explaining what they're doing as they're doing it. You then transfer that work to who will now be responsible for it. Now, remember, we don't assign direction, meaning we don't decide for them. We assign or we delegate responsibilities. So I would go to this person and say, hey, listen, it's important. We did this for shipping recently. We'd say it's important that we ship and it arrives timely. Here's our best practice. They then can replicate it when they are faced with challenges or questions. It is their responsibility to make a decision around it. But here's the ultimate trick. Once they've taken on this responsibility for a short period of time, it is then required that they create another training video, that they create one, not because they're going to train someone else, but ultimately the best student in any classroom is the teacher. I will know they've mastered a process once they can adequately teach the process. So they create the next video. We now capture their knowledge. Anytime they have an innovation, they create another video. So they keep on teaching it, even though no one's going to consume that teaching. But now I have this redundancy. Should they move on to other opportunities, we can transfer that video to someone else and they can follow along. Or should we be able to delegate the work to someone else? We have the mechanism to transfer the knowledge very quickly.
Nice. So, that's a way of also for the control freak to know what they're doing.
Oh, that's right. That's right
Yeah.
too. But I would say that's probably an ineffective use of time.
Yes.
But if you feel so called, yes, you can.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, so you also talk about the importance of community building. I assume that's more of an outreach to your clients and customers. Is that right?
Yeah. So community building. As I wrote Clockwork, I found that there's a modern popular term that I feel I need to contest. The concept is called pivot, and I'm sure many people listening in right now, Marley, have heard this term. Pivot is the concept of try to sell something to your customer. If your customer's not resonating with it, you have to adjust your offering until they buy it, and keep adjusting and changing until ultimately you find a customer base that wants to consume it. And at first blush, it makes total sense. I mean, if customers don't want it, you can never sell it. The problem is I've seen countless businesses pivot their way into a business that they loathe. They're doing something customers are buying, but they hate it. Um, and so that's not going to work on a sustained basis. The reason we're in business is to generate income, but also, I hope, equally do something that brings you joy. So I believe in the method called alignment. And let me just say one more thing about pivot. Pivot is simply a new term for an established belief. It used to be called inflection point. Prior to that, it was called paradigm shift. So it's just a new terminology for change yourself. I believe we need to do alignment. And what alignment is first getting really clear about what is of service to us, what brings us joy, what do we love to do, what are we truly passionate about, maybe serves a greater purpose. However you define it, but it brings you joy. Then let's seek out the customer base that resonates with. So you don't seek out the customers first and adjust to them. You first figure out yourself, and then you serve the customers that it resonates with. Now, in practicality, it's not like we sit and just think like the thinker and wait one day and wait 20 years and finally have the idea and start doing it. That's not practical. We have to serve customers, but we have to be acutely aware of what's working for us and what's not. What's working is the stuff we want to replicate. So as we're serving customers, it's kind of a grand experiment. Find the customers you love serving. Find the customers that you love serving in a specific way. Like, what's the work you like to do? Once you know those two elements, then we seek out in cloning those extraordinary customers. And I wrote a whole book about that method. But in short, what you do is you identify the traits of your best customers and use them as a gateway to find their community, because often birds of a feather flock together. Your best customers are with other best customers who have very similar needs, and you access that point through your best customers, and now you start cloning them. And that's where the ultimate growth comes. You commit to a specific customer base once you've really figured out who and what you are and can deliver it on automatic, and that will facilitate rapid and healthy growth.
Yeah, I like that. That's like finding your people, right? It's,
find your peeps.
People, it's like a great synergy because you're doing what you love and they love what you do.
Yeah, I was a long time ago. I had to kind of do some shock therapy for a client where I was walking him through this concept, and he goes, "Well, we need to do anything for anybody." He's like, "We need money." I said, "Okay, so you'll do anything for anybody?" He goes, "Yes." And I said, "What about price?" He goes, "Well, we start with a price, but sometimes we haggle." So I'll say, "You'll do anything for anybody, sometimes at any price." Is that correct? He's like, "Yes." I said, "You just defined a prostitute." I said, "Your business is a prostitute. You're sacrificing yourself just to make the quick buck." And that was his shock therapy. He's like, "Oh my gosh, we've become a prostitute." And I think, sometimes you got to shock businesses back to life like that. Kind of like those two panels when someone's having a cardiovascular event. You pop them, and it kind of awoke in his eyes, and he realized that if he's really going to think of himself as valuable, he has to serve a community that sees him as valuable.
Oh, that's so true. I'm just curious. We've talked here about a few things from your latest book, the 4Ds, vision and alignment. Do you think these things helped you? You talked about the entrepreneurial poverty. Did that? These kinds of things, are they the secret to overcoming that?
Yeah. So these are the secrets to overcoming entrepreneurial poverty. Here's what I've discovered, and this is actually now becoming the premise for my next book that's not coming out actually till 2020, but I've started the research, and the thesis of the book is, I believe the biggest problem entrepreneurs have is they have not identified what their biggest problem is. And what I mean by this is there's this constant survival mode of addressing apparent issues, like, oh, we got to do this today, got to take care of that. Oops, this email is urgent, I got to jump on that. And so we address the apparent, and we don't address the impactful. What I found is almost all businesses go through the same progression. And I know we're all unique and have uniquenesses, but all businesses go through the same arc, if you will. The base is we need sales. Like, I don't care what business you're in. If you have zero sales coming in, you are screwed. Yeah. So we need to first address sales consistency. Once that is achieved, we need to move on to profitability. We need to ensure that a portion, ideally a strong portion of that money, is getting into our personal bank account and is available as a resource for the business if there's any disaster. Sadly, most businesses, I'd say the vast majority, over 80% in my estimation, never get to that profitability component. In fact, many of them are not profitable, and they think that more sales are the solution. So that they go right back to that base need of just make money and everything will solve itself, which is not true. You first need to make money, but then you need to learn how to be permanently profitable. Well, and that's why I wrote Profit First, is that's how to get to that level. The next level up then is time. And that's what we've been talking about with Clockwork, is once you have consistent sales, once you have permanent profitability, then it comes about balance. How do we extract ourselves from the business so there's no dependency on our time? How do we stop being in the time for money trap, where the only way to make more money is to work harder? How do we make our business run on automatic? How do we bring back balance? The core concept here is that we're not in life to support business, we're in business to support life. And then there's levels beyond that I've identified, 2 more levels beyond time. But sadly, most businesses, and now I'm talking about 99% in my estimation, will never get to that level of having enough time. we will always be beholden to our business. That superhero complex will stick with us. So my intention with Clockwork is to break through that so we can get to the even higher levels.
Okay, so I think what I'm getting out of this is, you had mentioned earlier that when you're first starting your business, you were working, almost 24 hours a day, and that's not sustainable. But that kind of passion, so it's like maybe kind of an ebb and flow of that, but maybe the beginning of a, you're starting your blog or whatever, and you're just working all the time, but you do that to create the profit. And then once you get that down, then you move towards, okay, now we've got to manage the time. And that's where we're going to hire the team. We're going to get these 4Ds down, that kind of thing.
Yeah. So I believe you're right. I believe there is a navigation of emotion, and we do have to reinvent ourselves
Yeah.
throughout. I think the base level is fear.
Uh-huh.
And I think it's an ally to a certain point. Fear gets us up, but at a certain point becomes overwhelming and can cause harm, sickness. So fear, I believe, ultimately has to become confidence. Confidence is where there's some form of predictability. Confidence doesn't mean comfort, by the way. It just means there's some form of predictability. I think after confidence is an aspiration. And I think that's where there is strong comfort. Now we're starting to reach. In the early stages, we're trying to collect. Now we're trying to reach. And the highest level, I think, is purpose. I believe, as I've been analyzing this, there's embedded in there is two major steps. I believe every business must be in a get mode in the beginning. I need to get sales. I need to get profit. I need to get more time for myself. Then it transitions to a contribution or give mode. Sadly, some businesses start because they have a noble cause. They want to give, but they skip the getting stage. I've seen this mostly in the not-for-profit industry, but I've seen it in for-profit too, of this great cause they want to serve, which is so noble, but they don't take care of themselves and the business falters and dies. So we need to care for ourselves, put the oxygen mask on yourself first before the next passenger.
Right.
You got to do that first before you can go into this contribution phase. And I find that the greatest rewards, because I've been lucky now to navigate through these stages myself, it took 20 years of learning and understanding, but I've gotten through it now, that the contribution phase is the most wealthy, if you will. It's the most rewarding by far, more than anything else.
Really? I'm surprised to hear that. So when you say contribution, you're saying contributing to others?
Yeah. And I'm not saying I'll write out a check every 2 days to somebody. Contribution means that you are delivering something of extraordinary impact where I call it shifting souls. And what I did is, when I got clarity that my life's purpose is to eradicate entrepreneurial poverty, it came from my own circumstances. I lived through this. I had the trauma around it, and I committed to never allow this to happen to myself or anyone again. That defined my purpose. I then had to build my business so that I could be on that mission. And so now my business has predictability and strength. I don't have to worry about profit or sales. I may in the future, and when it happens, I'll have to revert and focus on that. But I've built the infrastructure for the foreseeable future and the historical recent past. It's been very predictable, and that's brought about this comfort, which then allows me to focus on purpose. And purpose, again, is impacting entrepreneurs. Now, I do it through education. Like what we're doing now, you probably hear my energy. Like I'm like jacked up right now. I want to jump through this microphone and hug everyone there and say, we got this. We're together. I can't be in that state if I have worry behind me. And that's why there's so much joy in contribution. Once the getting is addressed, the giving is the most joyful. I can see and get the feedback, because I've put what's called a feedback loop in place, of people being impacted and their lives changing. And now they are amplifying my message or their own message and being of service of others. And that is I can't even explain how much joy and satisfaction comes from that. That's where I see true wealth.
Oh, yeah, I think that makes so much sense. And like you say, that confidence that comes from that, I think it's like perpetually feeding itself to propel you forward, I guess.
That's exactly
I love
it.
that. Okay, so just one final question before we go into this. I like to ask these fun questions at the end of the interview, but first I wanted to ask you if there's this food blogger out there that's struggling to be, this, fulfilled entrepreneur. What should they do first? Is it the best recommendation to read Profit first and then to follow that up with Clockwork? Is that how you'd recommend that?
Oh, I love that question. So the best thing may not to be to read any of my books. The best thing to do first is to ask yourself, where am I stuck? Really evaluate yourself. am I struggling to find customers? Do I have some money coming in, but it doesn't stay in my pocket? Really get to the root cause, because the book you should read is the one that addresses your main
Hmm.
challenge. If you're struggling with profit, if you're not having money in your pocket, profit first, I think, will be of great service. If you're working your tail off and can't get traction, maybe clockwork is it. If you're trying to make that first hire and you're struggling to find that person, I haven't written that book, but there's extraordinary books out there that are written, and I would seek out that. So ask yourself what your biggest challenge is, and then seek out the solution for it. Only tackle one challenge at a time. Never try to do multiple things at once, because that dilutes us. Pick the big one and make your best guess at it. Maybe you don't nail it, but just pick your biggest issue. I'm sure you got quite a few that you can sort through. Get a book that addresses that and start there.
Oh, that's great. Okay, Mike, I love to ask these fun questions at the end of the interview. Are you game?
I'm
Okay, so
game.
this is a podcast mostly for food bloggers. So we have to talk about food a little bit. So can you tell me about a favorite food of yours?
My favorite food item is blueberries. I
Blueberries.
am I am ridiculously addicted to blueberries.
Wow. What's your
Um,
favorite way to eat
yeah, I
them?
try to grow them too. Blueberries are really uh, difficult to grow because of the acidic needs they
Yes.
have. But God, do I love that fruit.
And what's your favorite way to eat them?
Well, raw. So I'm one of those guys. I can down a pint. I could down like a quart of those things. Uh, I love them raw, but I love them baked into things. Their taste changes dramatically when they're
Yeah.
cooked. So blueberry pie ain't too
No.
shabby. On a salad ain't too bad. But just raw blueberries with just a slight drizzle of honey, locally grown,
Oh,
locally or harvested, I should say, locally harvested honey over a blueberry.
yeah.
Heaven.
They are so good for you too. They're loaded with antioxidants.
Oh yeah, right. Someone said eat the rainbow. So I really love fruit and vegetables, but I really love fruit. So I try to do as much color as possible. But whenever I can sneak in blueberries, that's my
I actually
default.
went to there's a blueberry farm here in Missouri, and I went and picked some myself. It's kind of fun.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah. Oh yeah. It's funny. Just to that point, like one of my greatest childhood memories is picking blueberries, and I wonder if that's caused my affinity. I
Yes.
was in Maine. I was in Maine and at a farm with my parents' friends, and I was a young kid, maybe 8 or 9 years old, and they let me out in the field with the golden retriever. And to me, this maybe it's like a 20-acre property. It felt like it was miles. I felt like it was in the middle of nowhere. And I remember just sitting, finding a blueberry bush, and just picking blueberries and eating them for what felt like the entire day. It was, oh my god, it's my favorite childhood memory.
That probably is why you're so obsessed with blueberries.
Probably, yeah, it's my affinity toward
I
them.
love
Yeah,
it. Okay, Mike, what's the favorite app on your phone?
probably Bonjoro. And if you haven't heard of this
I
app,
haven't.
it is a game changer for business. Bonjoro, spelled Bonjoro. Every time a prospect or customer takes an action on my website, I define what the action is. Maybe they sign up for something or do whatever action it is. It sends me a notice. It then allows me with one click, just push one button to record a video in response and say, "Hey, it's Mike. Thanks for taking that action. I hope you love it," or whatever I want to say. And then it actually sends the video to them, and I communicate with a huge portion of readers over time via video.
Okay, I'm going to test this out. I'm going to sign up for your email list because I want to get this video from you.
Oh, yeah, okay, yeah. So a lot of people, I get tested about 100 times a day now. So
Wow.
I, yeah, but definitely test me out. It doesn't mean I'll get to it necessarily, but because each video I'll do like a 10 to 30 second
Oh,
video.
yeah.
But when I'm stuck at an airport for three
Sure.
hours, I bang out like 200 videos.
That's a great tool. And then talk about feeling personally involved. I mean, the
Yes.
customer feels like they're just connected with you that way.
Listen, like every person listening in right now, you are a rock star to your community. And could you imagine your favorite band
Oh,
if you send them a message and the lead singer, that's you, writes back and says, "Hey man, thanks for checking us out, man." Whatever their voice is like. Well,
that's what my favorite band
that
sounds
was my
like.
lame rock star voice.
That was it.
But thanks for being a groupie, man. So for me, it's the equivalent of my mini rock star moment. And some people wet their pants.
Yes.
I can't believe an author or a blogger or whatever had the time to respond to me. Think about the natural and genuine loyalty that builds toward each other. It's a phenomenal
Oh,
tool.
I love it. I can't wait to check it out. Okay. Okay. This one's a tough one because you sound really busy. I don't know if you can do this, but do you have any time for TV or reading at all? And if you do, what's your favorite?
I don't watch much TV at all. So I almost have to pass. This is so lame. Like Modern Family, if I can sneak in a few episodes, I'm like catching up on that. What a fabulous
Yeah.
show. Um, and then radio, I'm a podcast listener. You know what I love is Mike Rowe has a podcast series that says, what's it called? Like The Way I Heard It. And it's a throwback to these old radio shows that are almost like a mystery,
Yeah.
but they're short 8-minute
Oh,
podcasts
nice.
that always end with this unexpected twist. It's so well
Ooh, I'm going to
produced.
check that out. Okay.
That's the guy, Mike Rowe's the guy from Dirty Jobs, by the way.
Oh.
Uh, it's funny because his job was to, dig pig crap out of a pen. Like that was his job on TV. The guy is an intellectual beyond belief.
Isn't that, that's where you find the intellectuals in the pig slop, That's my theory.
Yeah, right. You totally
Yeah.
do. It's funny, and that opened my eyes to this concept. Like as I told you earlier, to look over to other people. Shame on me for ever have been judging others and looking at, oh, you're just a farmer or you're only a so and so. Now I realize I am the idiot. I am the fool in the room here. Everyone has this intellect and exposure that I don't understand, and it manifests and presents itself in different ways. But everyone has something that you just don't know until you get to know them.
I have a perfect story to illustrate what you're talking about, and it's actually a movie on Netflix. Since you don't watch TV, you probably haven't seen it, so I could tell you this. But this, I wish I could think of the name of it. I'll put it in the show notes page. But there is this guy who paints, buildings. I mean, he paints houses. He's just like a workman and doesn't do. He's not esteemed in his neighborhood or anything, but in his youth, he recorded a couple of albums that did nothing in the States, but come to find out there's this town or this city in Africa where it was huge. He was just like a rock star there. And
I've heard of him.
Yes, it's like Guffman, I think his name is.
I think it was titled In Search of Guffman or something.
Finding Guffman, or something like that.
I think it's an African-American gentleman in Chicago or something.
Yes. And he shows up to his painting gigs in like rock star outfits, but he's just like this lowly guy that nobody would even realize who he is. But then, so they did send him back to this town in Africa, and he performed his songs in front of the thousands of people. It's just the greatest story.
Wow. I think Marley, we all have that community out there.
Yes.
And they're starving. They're starving for us. They're starving for what we do. We just need to be open to understanding they are there. And then welcome.
And to believe in yourself enough,
Yeah.
I love that. Okay.
That's cool. I got to check out that movie. I've heard of his story.
You have to watch it. You're totally going to love it. It's really very good. Okay, Mike, how can people find you online?
So I'll give you two ways. I'll give you the hard way and easy way. Hard way is to go to my website, MikeMichalowicz.com. The reason that's the hard way is because no one can spell Michalowicz. To persuade my wife to take on that name was a doozy. God bless her. She actually did. The shorter and more effective way is to use my nickname, which is Mike Motorbike. Here's the irony. That was my nickname in high school. I've never driven a motorcycle. I have no intention to drive a motorcycle, but my nickname was Mike Motorbike. Yeah. So if you go to MikeMotorbike.com, it brings you to my website. As you know, I'm an author. All my books are there. Free downloads, chapters, so you can experience it. I also wrote for the Wall Street Journal for years. You can get free articles from the Wall Street Journal. I'm a blogger and also a podcaster.
Are you on any social media?
Yeah, I kind of stink at social media. I'm on Twitter actively. I'm weak at Instagram and Facebook.
Okay, got you. Well, Mike, thanks for taking the time to talk with me today. I had a really good time.
Marley, I appreciate the interview. It was a joy.
Thanks to Mike Michalowicz for being my guest on today's episode of the Chopped Podcast. We had an amazing webinar last month featuring Brandy Crawford of the site Stay Snatched and myself. We were talking about Google Analytics and updating your site for SEO. We had a lot of great feedback from that webinar, and there will be more down the road. So I want you to sign up for the Chopped Academy newsletter today so you'll be the first to know when our next webinar happens. Go to chopped.academy and scroll down to the bottom of the page and hit subscribe. Thank you to everyone for your support of the Chopped Podcast. Your reviews on iTunes and Stitcher make such a big impact. It takes only a few seconds of your time, and it means so much. Also, take a screenshot of yourself listening to the Chopped Podcast and share it with me using #ChoppedPodcast on Instagram. I love seeing your photos, and it just means so much to hear from you. You inspire me, and I hope today's show was helpful and inspirational to you as well. Thanks for listening, and have a great week.